Hello everyone, this is Tiger Slash the Second. I've been kind of absent from the channel lately because after the Codex and the FAQ dropped in such short order, I didn't want to do any kind of unit analysis videos or army suggestions without getting adequate playtesting in first. The last thing I want to do is give anyone the wrong ideas. With that in mind, I carried forward with a few games of rather unusual build style for Dark Eldar, at least for what I've been seeing recently. With that in mind, I'd like to give some feedback on what I think might be a slept on or otherwise unexploited list building idea for Dark Eldar in 8th edition post FAQ. Now, the reason that I waited for after the FAQ was I'd heard a lot of rumors, and the ones that I posted happened to be true, but it went much, much deeper than I ever expected into just how heavy-handed this FAQ would be. And you can expect a video on what I think the ramifications of that alone are going to be moving forward. But this list, I want to get it out there because I think other people need to try it too. I've been testing it myself, and it's been working, in my opinion, way better than it should. I've tested it against casual players, against players who are good at the game but not necessarily tournament level, and then against people looking to compete in the tournament scene, and its results have been rather unusual. So let me go over it. It is, first of all, an entire Dark Eldar Brigade. So you're starting off with 12 command points there. You are getting the 3 for being battle forged. And I'm running the Alliance of Agony with a Archon aligned to the Cabal of the Blackheart, a Succubus from Red Grief, and Urian Raykarth, Prophets of Flesh. So we start off with an Archon. In this case, this Archon is equipped with what they were equipping Archons with in 3rd edition, but I run it with a Blaster, a Phantasm Grenade Launcher, and an Agonizer. Then we have Urian Raykarth in all of his 3rd edition glory. And through the Alliance of Agony, he gains his Warlord trait as well. I forget what it's called, but it's the one that gives you D3 command points in addition to giving him a free reroll. And then Succubus. Now the Succubus is equipped with an Agonizer and Splinter Pistol. I'm sorry, the Archite Glaive and Splinter Pistol. Basically as cheap as possible. She's going to be a melee character, so you give her +1 to her invulnerable save as her Warlord trait. That just makes her unusually durable. Now, the Brigade requires 6 troop slots, and choosing these troop slots is really key, because part of the reason that I prefer to run the Brigade is it allows you to get away from the extraneous HQ and troop tax of running multiple battalions, or 2 battalions and a spearhead, or something like that. So to start it off, you're going to need witches. I run 9 witches. I give them a Shardnet and Impaler, and I give their Hecatrix an Agonizer with a Phantasm Grenade Launcher. All in all, their job is basically to tar pit. Their job is to get to enemy infantry that you don't want going anywhere and hold them down with the 4-up invulnerable save. The Shardnet Impaler buff that happened in the Codex is, to me, really a game changer in melee combat with infantry, because now you can deny them the ability to just disappear from combat, leaving your witches high and dry, which was previously their biggest flaw. I also like to run a 10-man unit of Rax. Now, the purpose of the racks is to be near Uri and Raykarth and get +1 strength as well as +1 toughness. These are being run in a brigade, however. They don't have any obsessions to rely on, so they're not getting that 4-up invul save. They only have a 5-up. To me, that's fine, because what you're getting instead is extra command points. You're getting more points to play with. And really, their best defense is not coming from that 4-up. Their best defense is coming from their high toughness. The witches have a 4-up, and they still die in droves. The racks with a 5-up invul save and toughness 5 are still going to be ridiculously hard to kill. And those 2 extra command points you get from running a brigade instead of running a couple of battalions, or 3 extra command points you get. No, 2 extra command points. 2 extra command points you get from running a brigade instead of 2 battalions means not only do you get access to more models, but you get those 2 command points. Those 2 command points can be used on the Cornucopians' stratagem, which allows you to pull off a wounded unit of racks and redeploy them 6 inches away from a table edge. That right there gets you all of those, like, no amount of invul saves is going to make up for the fact that you're able to redeploy these racks with those extra command points. This is how you have to think of this list going in. You have at your disposal plenty of command points to make up for the fact that you lose all your obsessions. It sounds a little crazy, but as I go on, it's going to make a little more sense. Now, for the remainder of the troops, I have 4 squads of 5 Kabalite warriors. Now, the point of the Kabalite warriors is zone denial. You're using the Kabalite warriors to stop deep strikes. This was more important before the beta rules for deep striking were released. But it's still important now because chances are those Kabalite warriors are probably going to still be on the board come turn 2. They're still going to be making a nuisance of themselves. And if they're not, then your opponent will have more or less revealed his hand if he shoots off a group of Kabalite warriors that are specifically positioned to block deep striking turn 1. You pretty much know where he's planning on deep striking on turn 2, so you can move yourself around to accommodate that. So those are your troop options. A unit of 9 witches, a unit of 10 racks, and 4 units of 5 Kabalite warriors, completely bare. For your elites, I have a 5-man unit of mandrakes, Now, the purpose of the mandrakes is kind of the same as the warriors, except you can use it in offensive or defensive terms. Really, I hold them off until turn 2. The reason being, you can use them to spot fill to prevent deep strikes, or if you use them on turn 1, even after the beta rules, you can just redeploy them in your deployment, fill on a spot that happened to be shot away on turn 1 that was held by Kabalite warriors, and there you go. They're only 80 points, they've got -1 AP, they have a chance to do mortal wounds, they pretty much just make a nuisance of themselves. I had them arrive on turn 2 and single-handedly wipe a Stern Guard squad that was entrenched in cover by themselves with minimal casualties. I can't recommend just having one squad hanging around enough because it is such a Swiss Army knife. And that's really the other thing I was going to use this brigade for, is because you have access to the entire Codex. In lieu of obsessions, what you get is access to every single unit. You always have the right tool for the job. You need high toughness models? Racks. You need something fast that's going to hold stuff down? Witches. You need a spot filler to prevent deep strikes? Warriors. You need another spot filler that can advance into enemy territory? Mandrakes. For more elites, I have a unit of 5 grotesques. and their job is to basically be either a spearhead or to run along a flank. They can hold a flank pretty well all by themselves. They've been buffed so that they're not only cheaper, but they have an additional AP on their weapon, and they have an extra wound. These little buffs go a long way to making them a very effective killing unit. Alright, and for my last elite, the Beastmaster, which of course comes with Razorwing Flocks. Razorwing Flocks got an enormous buff in this Codex rather. On the one hand, they dropped by 2 points apiece, which almost but not quite puts them in spammable territory. The other thing is, they made their bookkeeping a heck of a lot easier. They dropped their number of attacks by half, but they increased the AP on their attacks to -1. They also made it so that they hit on a 4-up instead of a 5-up. What this means is there's going to be less re-rolling, and there's going to be half the number of attacks, but the math pretty much comes out to the same thing fighting anything toughness 4 or greater. That means that they're not only faster and easier to run, but with that -1 AP, I'm personally of the opinion that when you're fighting things with a very high invul save, which tends to be going around a lot recently, things with -1 AP are significantly undervalued, because really anything -3 or higher going against anything with an invul save is just wasting that extra AP, and you always pay for your beneficial stats and your points. It doesn't make sense to fire a Dark Lance at something that's got a 4-up invul save. But it makes sense to throw a whole bunch of birds with a -1 AP against it. They can be really, really tough to defeat too. These things usually go down in 3 turns with a concentrated fire, because you're looking at 48 wounds right there. That doesn't just disappear, especially if you give the Beastmaster the Splinter Mind combat drug, which increases its leadership to 9. Getting those bases to flee off the battlefield is a real pain in the butt. So let's move on to our fast attack options. For my fast attack options, it's really just 3 of the same thing. 3 units of Scourges. I will be surprised if all of these stand up, because the vast majority of them are old 3rd edition models that are so ridiculously top heavy you have to glue washers to the bottom to get them to stand up on the table. But they're cheap, and personally I think they look cooler. I think I covered that in my 7th edition Scourge video. Oh, god damn it. The plastic ones can be finicky too. And there we go. 3 units of Scourges, each equipped differently. There is no overlap here. One of them is equipped with 4 Dark Lances, one of them is equipped with 4 Haywire Blasters, and one of them is equipped with 4 Shredders. Reason being, like I said before, right tool for the job. Your Shredders are going to go against any kind of tough infantry, usually entrenched. If it's not, then you can just shred it. Dark Lances are going to be hanging around in the back, probably in ruins. You're going to be getting a nice 3-up armor save. They're going to have 36 inches to reach out and gut the enemy with those Dark Lances. And they don't have to move too much, because preferably they're going to be in an elevated position with good line of sight. And the Haywire Blasters are good midfielders. They're ones you can drop on turn 2 and turn 3. You don't have to feel pressured to place them because they got 24 inches of reach. And they do solid, reliable damage. They also tend not to make themselves targets, because yes, they do mortal wounds, and yes, they're dangerous to vehicles, but they're probably not going to nuke something on the turn they come in. They're just there to do steady, reliable damage, and they don't cost a lot. They're not that threatening to things that aren't vehicles, so the opponent doesn't tend to concentrate on them. What their job is, in my experience, is not to kill vehicles outright. It's to finish off wounded vehicles that your Dark Lance Scourges have already taken a few shots at, or it's to target vehicles that you don't want shooting at full ballistic skill and knock them down a notch. That's really where they shine. Being able to get a Wave Serpent or a Fire Prison to go from a 3-up shot to a 4-up shot is a pretty big deal if you're fighting with a infantry-heavy army like this. So that fills out the fast attacks rather nicely. And for heavy support, yeah, it's kind of similar. First up, we've got a Talos with 2 Macro Scalpels and a Heat Lance. And then we've got a Talos with 2 Macro Scalpels and 2 Haywire Blasters. And then we have a Kronos with a Spirit Probe. Now, you might be wondering, well, why the heck are you running the Kronos? That thing is so weak in close combat. It's only strength 5, and it's got, very lousy damage output, and its shooting's terrible, and there's a reason for it. First of all, with the Spirit Probe even, you're running that thing for 70 points. When it's near Urian, it is strength 6, it's toughness 7, it has a 5-up invul save, it has a 3-up armor save, and it's got a 6-up feel no pain. It is ridiculously tough for a 70-point unit. Even if it doesn't have the Spirit Probe, which it should, because if you use it once, it's already paid for itself. But even if it doesn't have the Spirit Probe, 65 points is a remarkable bargain for something that durable. Opponents also tend to disproportionately choose it as their target over the Talos. I'm not entirely sure why. I think they don't know what it does. At any rate, it looks big and scary, and it's a great distraction Carnifex, and dollars to donuts, whatever your opponent shoots at it is not going to earn its points back, because it is so undercosted, in my opinion. It should probably be costed somewhere around 80 to 85 points, about as much as a Raider, for how durable it is. The 2 Taloses are reliable beat sticks. The one with the Haywire Blasters comes in under 100 points, and does reliable damage to vehicles, does reliable damage to infantry, does reliable damage to just about anything it encounters. And the Talos with Heat Lances, if it gets close enough to use them, it just annihilates whatever it shoots. And then, of course, there's the close combat, which is very nasty. Now, the ones that aren't mandatory slots, and I guess the birds are too, because if you have a Beastmaster, the birds are slotless. I have 3 Raiders. All 3 are identically equipped. They have Disintegrator Cannons and they have Shock Prowls. In one Raider, I will run the 5 Grotesques. In one Raider, I will have 10 Racks. And in another Raider, I will have 9 Witches and their Succubus. The Raider's job is basically to protect them on turn 1, to make sure that they can get where they need to go on turn 1, and if not, then to get them into favorable terrains that they can hold objectives easily. And the last thing I have to fill out my slots is a Void Raven Bomber. This again is not a mandatory slot, it is a flyer, but I took the Void Raven missiles with it too. I have had games that the Void Raven has done very well. It has softened up enemy infantry lines, it has done reliable anti-tank damage, and basically made a nuisance of itself all game and definitely earned its points. I've had other games where it's been shot out of the air on turn 1. It's pretty expensive, but not ridiculously so, and it went down in the Codex, so I have a fondness for the model. It hasn't done poorly enough for me to remove it from the list. I know some people say that the Razorwing Jet Fighter is better, but I happen to really like the Mortal Wound Bomb. I think it does very well. So, this in total is the list. There are a few points left hanging around. Even with the Ossifactors and Electro-Corrosive Whip on the Racks, and the War Gear on the Witches, there's still a little bit of room left, so You can add Phantasm grenade launchers to taste. I really like those. I think that they're undervalued because you can turn them into torment grenades with a single stratagem and basically have an 18-inch smite that can target anything, not just the closest characters or closest units. And the way I will run this is essentially as a Swiss Army knife. Of all my raiders, be aligned to the Prophets of Flesh, so they get that nice toughness 6 bonus. Have Urian just chilling there, entrenched inside of the grotesque and Kronos blob. And I will webway, actually, the birds and the Beastmaster. The reason is that you can use the birds because they have such large bases, almost as portable terrain. As long as you've got a spot to put them on turn 2 or turn 3, they can come in and block, physically block, body block, whatever it is that you don't want getting by. Anything that gets close is fair game for them too, because they have the fly keyword. And after the FAQ, both the Taluses and the Kronos have the fly keyword as well. Just something to keep in mind. The raiders, after they unload their cargo, if they're still alive, will be the ones that eat Overwatch, and will generally just make a nuisance of themselves, claiming objectives and flying around shooting things with their disintegrator cannons, which are no slouches. This list works too well. I played against a fellow running Deathwatch, and that game was over in 1 turn. It just annihilated anything that got close, so when he dropped Plasma in, it killed a Raider, it killed a few Witches, and then everything died. I played against a fellow running the equivalent, basically, of a Space Marines battle company. He dropped in Terminators, he dropped in Stern Guard, he had Assault Marines, he had an Interceptor, he had Scout Marines in the back holding objectives, and by the end of turn 1, going into turn 2, everything that had dropped on the board was dead, and most of the stuff that he was shooting at me with was going to be dead to long-range Dark Lances and Disintegrators. The most challenging game I had was against a fellow running a Ynnari and Craft-Rolled Eldar Aliatok detachments, with Wave Serpents, Drop Guardians, Storm Guardians, Wraith Guard. He decided to run the Incarn, which is another unit I think is undervalued currently. Rangers holding the back line, a very destructive list, but by the end of turn 4 it was very clear the table dominance of the Dark Eldar was just insane, and you can see this is a lot of models for 2,000 points. This is, when you lay this out on the table, it gets, you're usually going to outnumber the opponent, and you're definitely going to have more drops than they are. Do I think this is a tournament-worthy list? Honestly, at this point, I don't think so. I think there are improvements that could be made, but what I'm saying is that it's punching way above its weight class. I don't know why it's doing as well as it is. Personally, I think that the real magic to it is not just the Swiss Army knife, right tool for the job kind of mentality that it carries, but also how that carries into the use of stratagems, which is another point that I wanted to mention. The use of stratagems with Dark Eldar is something that's been a point of contention right now. Some people think that rules as written, you're able to use the Agents of Vect stratagem with any Dark Eldar detachment. Some people think that you need a Cabal of the Black Heart detachment in order to use it. This is a discussion that's been going back and forth for quite a while. A detachment that was exploiting the fact that using any aligned detachment opens up all of the sub-faction detachments. For instance, any craft-rolled detachment will open up all of the craft-rolled specific detachment stratagems. So you can have a Aliatok detachment and have Siam Han and Beal Tan stratagems available to you. Those kinds of lists were at the LVO, I believe they were at Adepticon, and that is currently the interpretation of the rules as written. The Dark Eldar Codex has such a blatant disconnect between rules as written and rules as intended that this is having, that people are taking another look at it. So this detachment, this single brigade detachment, functions under the assumption that, yes, you can use Agents of Vect. Yes, you can use black cornucopians, or whatever it's called, to regenerate your Rex. You can use these faction or sub-faction specific stratagems in your general Dark Eldar detachment, because that general Dark Eldar detachment unlocks all the stratagems. I believe I talked about this in my previous video, how Agents of Vect was going to dominate in all of the Eldar meta, because all you need is a single detachment of any Dark Eldar. Really, you could run a squad of Kabalite warriors and a succubus to gain 80 points. That's a patrol detachment of Dark Eldar right there. Boom, you've got all of the stratagems, including Agents of Vect. If this changes, then this list loses its magic, because currently what it's bringing to the table is a minimum of 15 command points. That's 5 uses of Agents of Vect, or as many uses of other things as you can fit in there. I personally prefer to use Agents of Vect. I've only used it like 2 or 3 times in a game, and use the other command points, as well as the command points that I regenerate, to deep strike birds, to regenerate racks, to use torment grenades, and to use haywire grenades where I think they're applicable. Having all of those command points, especially if it's more than your opponent, really allows you to dominate them when you can just deny the use of their stratagems, because their stratagems proportionally cost them more. Their 3-point stratagems might cost them, almost half of the command points that they have, whereas it costs you a fifth to deny it, and you can roll to get them back. This really stacks the math of the command points in your favor. If the meta shifts, if the rules change and say, you know what, we're just not going to accept that rules is written argument, we're going to say, or Games Workshop releases an errata that says, you know what, you have to have a detachment of the specific sub-faction in order to use the sub-faction specific stratagems. I'm experimenting with ways to modify this list that will allow you to use those stratagems, and in addition, also gain the use of obsessions. The problem is there is generally a tax involved. You can usually make up the tax, though, by simply chopping up some of these more large and expensive units into smaller pieces. For instance, instead of having a big blob of racks, you can remove a unit of Kabalite warriors entirely and split it into 2 units of 5. That's one instance. This saves a few points here, a few points there. Overall, though, I honestly don't see this list lasting very long, because I do think that errata or FAQ from Games Workshop is going to come out that's going to limit the use of faction-specific stratagems. Personally, I think what they should do instead is make it so that you have to have a Cabal with a Black Heart Archon as the locus for using Agents of Vect. Reason being, for instance, the Black Cornucopian stratagem specifies Prophets of Flesh racks. Well, if your racks belong to any other coven, you can't use that. It's already built into the stratagem. Agents of Vect is just poorly worded. So if you specify, hey, you need a Cabal with a Black Heart Archon on the table to use this stratagem, there you go. This list still works, and it necessitates having a specific kind of Archon on the board. That's the direction I would use to fix that problem. I don't think that's the direction they're going to take to fix that problem, and I do think that problem is going to be addressed probably sooner rather than later. But as the rules stand right now, this list is 100% legal using all of those stratagems, and is, as a result, you have way too many command points to spend on denying other people's stratagems, and from my experience, people will either forget that you have Agents of Vect and try to use their stratagems for big plays, which you then shut down, which then they turn into tactical blunders, or they will remember that you have it and not use their stratagems at all. There are a few cases I've had where people have decided to just go ahead and use stratagems everywhere anyway and just try to burn you out of command points, and does work eventually, but they have to have a large stack going in, and the opponent that I had did not have a large stack of command points, so he basically ran himself out while I still had about half of mine. It's a very manipulative list because it looks almost like a joke. It looks like it shouldn't be able to function. There's just so much everywhere doing all sorts of different things. But this is my answer to spam. This is my answer to people running all of just one unit. I've got 4 units of warriors and 3 units of scourges, but they're all equipped completely differently. And the scourges and the warriors, they're troops. That's what you do with troops. There's not really any spam here at all. And the only thing that you are spamming is command points and stratagems and rolling for getting command points back. And that kind of pressure, that meta pressure, that across the table kind of pressure is, in my opinion, why this list functions so well. Because you're not playing the game so much as you're playing your opponent. You're making him overthink everything he does. And you can just sit back with your big stack of command points and think, do I want that stratagem to work? I don't want him to have that stratagem work. And he can't do the same back to you. And even if you're playing against another Dark Eldar player, chances are they're not going to have as many command points as you are, so you can still bully them with Agents of Vect a bit. But yes, that's what I'm running right now. That's what I'm looking into developing as my list going forward for more competitive environments. I'm hoping that I can find something better, because in my opinion this list should not work as well as it does, but I've yet to find someone who can really break holes in it. Any sort of issues that I've had with it have been entirely from tactical blunders. They haven't been from the list not performing, or the units not performing, or not having enough anti-tank, or not having enough anti-infantry, or not having enough close combat or shooting. It's always been tactical issues on my part as I'm learning to play the army again. So yeah, that's what I've got going on with my Dark Eldar, and you can expect a video on the FAQ to be coming soon. Until next time.